let's go ahead and get into this second segment. So this game was beautiful. Why? It was snowing. I love snow games. The obviously, the players they would much rather not play in snow, but it's always so fun to watch like, a football game and it's just inclement weather, especially when it's snow just falling down and being all over the turf, the grass. It was just a beautiful game. Some of the players they look like ghosts on Amazon Prime's broadcast. Like since we all know that Thursday night football games are now being streamed on Amazon, and it's it looked weird, like seeing some of these players as ghosts. But again, this game was beautiful towards the end. Now, the snow did not. I know it looks like it was snowing all day, but the snow did not start until like around. I want to say maybe the third quarter, like around mid third quarter, something like that. That's when the snow sort of started. And then once the snow started, it just started pouring. Like it did not stop. And when I saw that, I was like, that is beautiful. It got all over the turf. It got, well, the grass, whatever it is that they play on. It got everywhere. All the fans were still in attendance as well. It's just a beautiful game to watch when it's snowing. Obviously, it's super cold and makes the game a little bit more difficult, but it was great. I loved watching snow games. And the only snow game that I did not like watching was the snow games where Tom Brady just effortlessly wins the game despite, it doesn't matter whether it is a snow or whether it is normal weather or not. His kicker was always going to make a snow, especially in the middle of a blizzard, which is incredible. But regardless, the game started out with Pittsburgh missing a field goal, of course, because they had to. And it didn't start out snowing, as I said, so there was really no excuse for missing that field goal. Then the Browns went 3-and-out, and then they turned the ball over on downs. The Steelers turned the ball over on downs. And then the Browns went 3-and-out again and were forced to punt. So already two missed scoring opportunities for the Steelers right there. Then they got on the board first with the field goal, but Jameis Winston answered right back with a touchdown drive to make the score 3-7. And then after getting the ball back, the Steelers ended up fumbling, which ended up with a Cleveland field goal. And that was the end of the first half, the score being 3-10. The real scoring in this game, ironically, came when it was snowing. And usually, some teams, they play worse when it's snowing. Some teams play better when it's snowing. I mean, all of the teams that are in like the northern part of the continent, they tend to play a lot better when it's snowing because those are the weather conditions that they're forced to deal with, and they know how to deal with it. Especially, and some of these players they've had to play in these conditions for most of their lives. And the third quarter started off with a fumble after 3 plays, so there's that. But then the Steelers once again turned the ball over on downs, which was a very common trend for the Steelers in this game. And it was absolutely horrible. I mean, those were 3 opportunities that I mentioned earlier where the Steelers could have ended up scoring. But then, luckily, the Browns ended up going 3-and-out again and forcing to punt. And then the Steelers, they ended up making a field goal towards the end of the third quarter to make the score 6-10. However, if you remember what I said earlier, they missed a field goal in the first quarter. If they would have hit that field goal, then the score right now would have been 9-10 with a very solid chance to win the game in the end. Then the fourth quarter came, and that was when all the scoring happened. The Browns, they ended up opening up the quarter with a touchdown. Then the Steelers answered right back with a touchdown of their own to make the score 13-18. And they ended up rushing the left guard for 3 yards for a touchdown. Jay Warren, he ended up scoring that rushing touchdown. And then on the very next possession, Jameis Winston had the ball and ended up fumbling, and it was a strip sack fumble, which resulted in the Steelers having the ball. And they answered right back with a touchdown pass of their own from, I believe it was Russell Wilson. He was in the game, obviously, and I believe the catch was made by Tomlinson. Let me just go ahead. Yes, it was. And it was a touchdown pass in snow, so it was absolutely beautiful to see live. And this puts the Steelers in the lead, 19-18. Obviously, the Steelers, after scoring the touchdown, they ended up trying to go for 2, but the 2-point conversion failed, mainly because of the snow blocking the way. One of the things that it was really difficult to see the ball for some of these receivers in this game, and it was also really difficult for the quarterback to be able to accurately throw the ball, as Jameis Winston opened up the very next drive throwing an interception, which it would have seemed like after that interception that the Steelers were going to win the game in the end after playing so ugly and their defense was able to hold them back. However, the Browns defense responded and they ended up forcing a 3-and-out and ended up punting. Then Jameis Winston's legacy drive came in, where he ended up scoring a touchdown. He converted on a 3rd and long, converted on a 4th and long as well. And on one of the plays on that touchdown drive, there was a little bit of confusion. So I believe there was either a delay of game penalty or a false start penalty on the Browns. And it would seem like the Steelers, they ended up accepting the penalty. Actually, no. They declined the penalty because it was 4th down, and then they ultimately decided to accept the penalty and prevent the team from gaining more yards and most likely punting the ball away. But this was the thing. This was the problem. I don't know why the Steelers elected to accept the penalty and make it 3rd and long, because shortly after that 3rd and long, Jameis Winston connected with one of his receivers, and it was a 1st down, which ultimately led to the touchdown drive. I think that if the coaching staff would have elected with the decision of keeping the ball on 4th down, declining the penalty, then they most likely would have won the game because they would have had possession. Because regardless whether the Browns ended up going for it on 4th down again, they would have had to go for it, and they would do it 2 different times. So the option that they chose not to go with was giving them one chance to convert on a 4th and long, or instead giving them 2 chances to convert on a much longer yard gain, and ultimately it resulted in a 1st down. So the way I see it, they only should have given the Steelers, they should have given the Browns only 1 possession to try and secure the win. Instead, they decided to give them 3, and they didn't even need the 4th down. They ended up converting on 3rd down anyway, and ultimately resulted in a touchdown. The Steelers, they still seem like they could have ultimately won the game, but at the end, the Hail Mary was batted down, and the Browns ended up winning. Obviously, I picked the Steelers. I thought the Steelers were going to win in this matchup because going based off of the history of Pittsburgh versus Browns rivalry, most of the time, the Steelers end up beating the Browns. Not to mention just how bad the Browns are this season alone. I mean, they're only 3-8, and it's really just it's unbelievable the fact that the Browns were able to beat the Steelers in this game. And what I find even more crazy is how the Browns, they have a winning record in their own division. So the only division game that they actually lost was against the Bengals. And let me just go ahead and check to see that they did not play the Bengals a second time. Yeah, they lost to the Bengals, and that was the only loss that they've had in their division. They stunned the Ravens and beat the Ravens, and now they stunned the Steelers, pushing the Steelers back to an 8-3 record. And ultimately, I believe, like, Baltimore fans, they were smiling so hard when this happened. And this propels the Ravens to try, and the Ravens are within 1 game away of being able to retake the number 1 seed, as opposed to being 2 games away of retaking that number 1 seed in their division in the AFC North. So this win was huge for the Ravens, more so than it was for the Browns. And I mean, that Jameis Winston drive, the fact that the defense gave that up, and the fact that Russell Wilson had multiple opportunities to put the game away, but ultimately didn't, it was really unfortunate. Because again, the Browns, they did have they threw an interception. And looking at the box scores for this game, you would think that the Steelers would end up coming out on top. I mean, Russell Wilson, he ended up going 21 for 28 on completions, 270 yards, with 1 touchdown on an average of 9.6 yards per attempt, and a QBR of 116. And not only that, Najee Harris ended the game with 41 rushing yards, and Jaylen Warren ended the game with 45 rushing yards and a touchdown. Now, while the rushing attack for the Steelers did not really seem all that competent, the Browns' rushing attack wasn't that competent either. Nick Chubb was in this game, and he ended with 2 touchdowns as well as the game-winning touchdown, I believe. And he also ended the game with 59 yards. And while I will say that those yards are impressive, again, it's a little bit lackluster. And yeah, Nick Chubb ran for 2 yards and scored the touchdown to ultimately win the game. And let's see. But when you look at the Steelers' stats, especially at quarterback, I mean, Jameis Winston in this game, he was 18 for 27 on completions for 219 yards and threw an interception with a QBR of 76. You would think that the Steelers, they ended up coming out on top in this game. And honestly, it's really not. I mean, I'm surprised that the Browns were even able to come out on top in this. It's really impressive. And it's an outcome that I did not expect. But the way that the Steelers play football, I will say, I've always said this, the Steelers, they play ugly football. However, in the end, they find ways to win. But there are times when ugly football is not going to win you these games. And this was one of those times. So that's really all that I have on this segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the third segment where I talk about the Lakers and the Orlando Magic game, because again, this was another game that I got absolutely owned in these predictions because almost every single one of my predictions ended up being wrong except for one game. And we're going to talk about one of those games that I ended up getting wrong, which was the Lakers going up against the Magic right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned if you're interested.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.